Hello, everybody. I'm Emma Kell. This is the first half of mine and Adrian's presentation for Bucks Teacher Learning Day. The reason this is in two parts is I'd love to make up a sophisticated excuse, but it's because I forgot to hit record until the end of my section on the 3rd of July. So I am re-recording it now for you, and the two will be put together so you can access them on our website and that's connectingbucksschools.com. I'm going to share my screen now, and I'll go through the presentation. So we're here to talk to you today about managing stress and self-care. Now, there's a lot of debate online about the words well-being and self-care and all of those different things. And they've been high on the agenda in some schools for some time now. But we will argue that actually they have never been so important. And there are all sorts of different reasons for that. But it fundamentally boils down to the fact that you can't do a job well if you're not feeling well within yourself. And that actually we have a responsibility to ourselves, to our families, to our loved ones, to our colleagues, and above all to our students, to make sure that we do look after ourselves. So between us, Adrian and I have, about 20 years research and experience of this subject. Adrian has written his book, which is called Wellbeing in the Primary Classroom. It's an award-winning book, and it focuses on the well-being of both pupils and teachers, and is full of all sorts of gems. I wrote How to Survive in Teaching, which was published 2 years ago. How to Survive in Teaching came about partly as a result of some blogging I was doing, partly as a result of my research for my doctorate, which was about parenting and teaching, but possibly above all because actually after an amazing career in which I was extraordinarily lucky, I didn't realize how lucky at the time to find myself in a number of different contexts where I was really, really happy. I then found myself in a context which wasn't right for me, and it really set me back. It made me quite ill. It had an impact on my family, my health, everything. And I started to think a lot about actually when teaching doesn't work, when being a teacher, being an educator in a certain school doesn't work out, what's going on there. So I took it upon myself to actually interview almost 4,000 teachers in various forms, surveys, conversations, and find out about some of the darker corners of our profession before going on and focusing my attention on schools which really get it right, individuals which really get it right. And the book is ultimately a celebration of our wonderful profession. Now, I'm very excited to say that Adrian and I have been working on a book together over the last year. It's due for publication in October. It is a sum of our ongoing research. It's very short, it's very concise, it's very practical, and it is all about precisely the subject I'm talking about, which is well-being and self-care. Now, the book is divided into 6 chapters. So we sat down and we actually separated out all the different elements of teacher wellbeing and self-care that we felt were particularly pertinent at the moment. The ones we're going to focus on today are perspective, managing workload, balance and self-care, and agency. But you can also find in the book chapters on purpose and values and positive relationships. Of course, the 6 areas are all intersecting. They all merge into one. There are certain themes which you'll hear today which come up again and again and again. So this section is all about agency. Agency, essentially control, autonomy, which actually come out as the answer to nearly all questions. So when we think about it, we've just been through this global pandemic. Our control, our sense of power over our everyday actions, over our impact on other people, has been seriously constrained. And that has actually had a huge impact on the well-being of many of us in education and beyond. So this section is all about actually really thinking about what we can control. So first of all, identifying it, and secondly, thinking about how we can actually begin to take control of and expand that area we can control. And then thinking actually quite carefully, pragmatically, about how we can make peace with the things we cannot control. So these circles may look familiar. They come from Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And I find myself coming back to them again and again and again in all sorts of contexts, not just in teaching, but also in life. And it's very simple, like the best models. I love a good theoretical model, but actually the best ones are really, really simple. So there are 2 circles, as you'll see. The circle of influence are the things that we are able to control. Okay, so we're able to control what we wear each day. We're able to control what we eat, what we drink. We're able to control, even if we make excuses about it, we're able to control how we speak to people. So we might be stressed out, we might have had a bad day, but actually if we snap at our loved ones, we do have some control over the tone of voice we choose and the words we choose to use. The circle of concern is the outer circle. And that is all of the things that are really, really important, but actually with the best will in the world, we have no direct control of them. And let's think about this again in the light of what we're still going through. Let's not get complacent about it. We're still going through this pandemic. And we can't control whether people live or die. You know, we can't control what is going on in the lives of our most vulnerable students. So where before we could look into the whites of their eyes and check on their health and give them a sniff to check that they're being washed properly, give them a cereal bar if they haven't been eating properly, give them a pair of shoes if their shoes have worn out again. We can't do those things. So actually, when we start to think about all the different things that are going on, from government guidance and decisions through to whether there's going to be a second wave or not, through to actually day-to-day things like, what does this person really think of me? You know, do they like me or not? Why did they look at me that way? These are all the things that we actually can't control, and that's called the circle of concern. So the theory here is that actually, if you can make your circle of influence grow, really, really focus on the things that you can control, and actually maybe bring elements of those things from the circle of concern into the circle of influence. So for example, you're really worried about vulnerable people in your community. Well, you can actually go out and do something to help, and it's such a tiny thing, but you know, each week I go out and I deliver a bit of soup to some people in the local community. I don't cook the soup. I can take no credit at all. It takes half an hour of my time, but it's something really, really small that I can do to contribute. So this is all about thinking about enlarging our circle of influence. And this image, this dates itself. It's from the beginning of the pandemic. I think it came out end of March, beginning of April of 2020. But I really like it. It's all about, yeah, precisely what I've just been talking about, but looking at things that actually we're really worried about, whether others are following the rules of social distancing, you know, all that awful frustration at the beginning of people not following the rules, the amount of toilet paper. We're never going to forget that period, are we? It's going to be one of those bizarre periods in human nature. How long this is going to go on for, we still don't know, do we? Predicting what will happen, we don't know that either. Other people's motives and how others react, all of those things that we cannot control. But have a look at the middle circle. So to some extent, you can control your attitude to things, and that's hard actually. And that's not about saying, "Don't worry, be happy." I hate that phrase. Let's be cheerful all the time. But maybe it's about stepping away from the media and stepping away from the news. Maybe it's about not giving ourselves such a hard time when we've set ourselves this hugely ambitious to-do list for the week. Maybe it's about not worrying too much about about someone's dismissive comment or rudeness, because actually realizing that they're carrying their own baggage that we can't control. Turning off the news is a pertinent one for me. My husband is a journalist, and so the news is always on 24/7. And I found early on that actually, like a lot of people, it was really, really getting to me. You know, it was this surreal existence where you would do Joe Wicks, and then around 2:00, the daily death toll would come out. And I found that actually I had to physically separate myself from that, and that doing that really, really helped. Similarly with social media, those perceptions of teachers, those perceptions of educators, perceptions of schools, which normally people, all of us would brush off and, oh, whatever, here we go again. Well, I know I'm doing a good job. But actually some of the strongest school leaders, some of the strongest teachers, some of the strongest TAs I know have been really, really upset by some of those headlines. I saw a friend yesterday who said, someone's had a go at the care of special needs students during this time. There was a headline saying they'd been abandoned. Well, I know a lot of people who work in special needs, and trust me, they have not stopped. They have spent every waking hour, as far as I can tell, actually doing as much as they can to keep those children safe. So all of these things, I think, they're the things that we can control. We can control how kind we are. We might think we can't, but we can. So I've got an exercise for you now. I would like you to draw. So hopefully you've got a pen and piece of paper in front of you. Grab one now. I would like you to draw 2 circles. And one on the inside, one on the outside. Remember, the inside one is your circle of influence, the things that you can control. Think about your daily actions. Think about whether you cycle or drive. Think about how often you speak to your parents, all of these different things. That's the inner one. And the outer one is the circle of control, which are the things that you cannot control. So let's just go back a second to look at those titles again. Oh, sorry. The outer circle is the circle of concern. Right, let's start that again. Okay, so the inner circle is the circle of influence, the things you can control. The outer circle is the circle of concern. So if you could now just take about 3 minutes, I'm going to turn my camera off, 3 minutes to just sit and actually jot down some of the things that are keeping you awake at night, that are worrying you, and just complete that activity. Thank you. Just about 30 seconds more on that one. So you might be writing down things like what you read, the kind of television you watch, the time you spend with your family, the time you spend alone. Teaching is a very hungry, a very noisy job. And how much time do we get actually to just go and stare into space? Okay. So this is a private exercise for people to do on their own. It's worth doing it at different points to look at actually what kinds of the things in that blue circle that are literally in many cases keeping you awake at night, and how you can maybe move elements of those into the yellow circle. It's worth doing with your colleagues. And again, if you do it in a similar way where people don't have to share unless they wish to, but it can be really revealing and it can be a really empowering task. So moving on now to another element of our research and another chapter in the book, which is all about managing workload. Now, this has been really interesting, back to those terrible headlines, you'd almost imagine that teachers have been having some extended holiday. But we know that's not the case. And in fact, actually, in many ways, workload has increased and has been utterly relentless. So this section is all about how we can take control of our time and our space, both during these extraordinary times, but also moving forward into hopefully a more normal routine. And I do want to talk briefly about presenteeism because it's something that we feel really, really strongly about. So Linda Stone has done some work on something called continuous partial attention. Now, I only came across this concept quite recently, but it is incredibly apt. So if you imagine yourself, you're in your office, you're in your classroom, it's the end of a school day, you're making a note of all the merits on the system, you're emailing a couple of parents, you've got 20 emails you need to reply to, and one of your colleagues walks in and they want to talk to you about something that's important but not life-changing, and you carry on typing and you say, yeah, I'm listening, carry on. And you're not actually listening at all. Just like, when you've got your own kids in the background and they're going, mum, 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 mum. You're not listening at all. But you can hear them. I can hear you. And that's called continuous partial attention. And it's this idea that we in this world that we live in, it is incredibly busy and incredibly noisy, and we're bombarded with information all of the time, and we want to be doing everything all of the time, and we disappear into these wormholes online. So we might start doing a task and then our phone goes ping, and then another email pops up, and then we suddenly think, oh, look at those nice trainers, whatever it is. And we live in a state of continuous partial attention, and it's absolutely exhausting and really, really draining, and it doesn't work. And so what we need to do is we need to try and learn to compartmentalize. And we know this, nothing we say in this presentation is going to be new in any way. And I've sat in presentations like this, and I've listened to Adrian, my co-author, and I found that actually sometimes just being reminded of something can be incredibly powerful. So I want to talk about bags briefly, and I want to talk about Dr. Karen Edge. And Dr. Karen Edge comes up in lots of my research, and I make no apologies for quoting her lots because she's fabulous. So Karen Edge has done some work called Global City Leaders for UCL and the Institute of Education. I believe it's funded by the ESRC. And this research is on leaders who are Generation X in various different countries, including America and Canada. And it looks at their well-being, and it also looks at actually the idea of succession. So if they're leaders themselves, how attractive do they make their own jobs look? So if you're a leader yourself, just think about what appearance you give off. So do you make your job look like the kind of job that other people would like to do? Because of course we all want brilliant leaders to come up. So how do we project the appearance of our job as one that is worth doing well, and actually fulfilling and enjoyable and satisfying and everything else? So Karen talks about things like how fast you walk. So if you're bombing it around school like a blue-ass fly the entire time, are you actually giving off an image that you need to run to do your job all the time, which actually suggests that it's not really doable at a normal human pace? And Karen talks a lot about bags and how many bags you carry. There's a lot about bags that I could say, but I'm going to try and focus it in. So there's two things on bags. One is when you walk into school in the morning, how many bags are you carrying? When you leave on a Friday, how many bags are you carrying? Now, I've got images and in fact memories of a wheelie suitcase on the way out of school on a Friday as a head of department. Now, what happened to that suitcase or that bag or that whatever it is of marking or reports or whatever it was? Well, it either sat in the car and gathered mildew, or it sat in the corner of my living room and glared at me all weekend and made me feel guilty. Did much happen with that bag? Not really. Did I open it? Probably not. So I know deep down, carrying that bag out on a Friday night, that actually the chances are that work isn't going to get done because I need a weekend because I'm a human being. But what do my colleagues think I'm doing? Just think about this from home. Would my colleagues who see me walking out with this bag of marking imagine that I am spending all weekend marking? And what do they think then? They think, well, actually, I need to do that then as well. I need to do that in order to be seen to be doing a good job. So what Karen says on bags is actually you need to learn to leave your work stuff at home. Sorry, you need to learn to leave your work stuff at work, at school, and you need to learn to have your home stuff at home. And at the moment she said that, I put my hand into my bag, and I was at an education conference, and I found a sock, a child's sock. I found some slime from one of the kids. I found all sorts of different things from home that I had no intention of using, shopping lists, all sorts. And I was carrying around this stuff, literally carrying this burden backwards and forwards. So in ordinary times, try to have just one bag and have your work stuff in one bag and your home stuff in another, and just carry one of them. Now, what's interesting about these recent months, of course, is that ruthless compartmentalization, which perhaps we were starting to get a bit better at, maybe, has completely gone out of the window, because we are sitting, as I am now, in an office at home, with the children in the background, with the cats in the background, with the washing up, with the laundry. It's all in one place. So this period has been spectacularly challenging for that very reason. And then, linked to this whole idea of continuous partial attention and everything else, we are constantly trying to multitask. And there's a really simple exercise which comes from Caroline Webb's How to Have a Good Day. And it's so simple that we almost didn't include it in the book, but actually for me, it was one of those light bulb moments. So it's very, very simple. All you do is you just count to 10. Just do it. Count to 10. Okay, now say the letters of the alphabet A through to J. Okay, now alternate, really simple. So you just go A1, B2, C3, etc. Okay, and then if you time yourself doing those things, what happens, it actually takes a lot longer to do the second version. And I know it sounds really obvious, and you might be thinking, oh, for goodness sake, but how many of us, when we're doing our marking, try to do lots of different things at lots of different times, rather than focusing on the same thing at the same time? And that really brought home to me that multitasking doesn't work. Finally, for me, I would like to talk about presenteeism. Presenteeism actually came up a lot in our live chat, and also in a previous webinar we did. This is about culture. This is about how things are done in certain schools. And I've got a picture of a car park for two reasons. One is I once locked myself in the car park as a result of overworking and just being a bit of a martyr, frankly, because many of us have this tendency, and I'm very honest about that. And I managed to get my car locked in the car park. I had to call the caretaker at 7:30 at night and get him away from his dinner, away from his family, and have him unlock the gate for me. Now, I can assure you that no amount of chocolate or whiskey or smiles or charm ever got me forgiven for that. Secondly, car parks are interesting, because if you go into some schools on a Friday afternoon about 4:30, the car park will be complete tumbleweed. There's nobody there. And I like schools like that. I like head teachers who go around on a Friday saying, actually, why are you still here? Go home. Go home and have some downtime. What you do get in a lot of schools, though, is this presenteeism, which is the act of being seen to be at work for longer than everybody else, or for as long as humanly possible. And alongside that, there's this idea of almost not admitting to being human, not admitting to being fallible. So back to global city leaders, Karen Edge found that actually a lot of the leaders she was working with weren't using the toilet during the day, during the working day. And the first question is, well, why? And the obvious answer is, well, they didn't have time. And yes, that's partly it, yes. But they weren't using the toilet because they didn't need to use the toilet, because they weren't eating and they weren't drinking. So, let's think about this for a second. We teach Maslow from Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We teach that from year 4, year 5. We know this stuff. We do it with students. And yet this failure to tend to our basic human needs as teachers, as institutions, as cultures within schools is a real problem. And it's something that we need to challenge as individuals, as leaders, as communities in schools, because it is, you know, it is just, it's so destructive. And at the heart of everything we talk about is this idea of the long game. You know, we don't want teachers who are going to outstanding themselves to death. You know, we don't want singing, dancing teachers who are going to be working 70, 80, 90 hours a week and then collapsing by Christmas. We want people there who can play the long game. And actually our students don't want that either. You know, when you actually think about when you're feeling fresh and when you've got stories and when you've got a sense of humor and what that brings to your lessons, compared to when actually you've got that buzz in your head because you're so exhausted, you're prone to snapping at the slightest thing, you've got a headache. You know, and the thing is, you can drag yourself in. You can drag yourself in with your limbs hanging off. You can drag yourselves in with stomach bugs and having to negotiate rushing to the toilet every 5 minutes. But your students aren't going to thank you for it. Believe me, I've tried it. You know, you stand in front of year 10 and say, look, I've dragged myself here and I've got a raging temperature, and they'll just look at you as if you're completely insane and say, well, why are you here, miss? You know, they know better. So presenteeism is one of the scourges of some elements, some corners of our profession, and it is something that we feel really strongly that needs to be challenged. And linked to presenteeism is this whole idea that actually, and we do this a lot in teaching, that actually if we throw more at it, maybe we'll make it better. So let's think, for example, about intervention and results and students who aren't quite at that grade 5. And so what do we do? We throw extra hours at them. We throw hours at them before school, lunchtime, after school, weekends, holidays. Do those hours actually have any substantive impact on their results? I'm not convinced that they do, and I'm yet to see any research which says that they do. And if you are working more than 50 hours a week, and I did a show of hands in the live session at this point, and actually well over 50% of people admitted to it, then actually your output is starting to fall. The quality of what you're producing is starting to fall. Or in fact, it's falling sharply. If you work more than 55 hours a week, you're actually starting to go backwards. So actually what you're producing is almost negative value. And that research, if you want to look it up, comes from John Penkerville of Stanford University. And do get in touch with me, at those that can, on Twitter if you'd like me to find that link for you. So finally from me, third mention of Karen, but this research is so powerful. And so what she did was she went around to these global city leaders, and she actually studied a number of them who'd suffered from extreme burnout, including someone in hospital who had been read his last rites because the symptoms of his exhaustion and stress and acute stress was such that he believed that he was going to die, and so did the medics. He didn't die, and he's back in teaching again. But what Karen says is that rock bottom is not the place to climb back from. You take your loved ones with you. So get in early, look after yourselves, respect yourselves and your right to be humans first and teachers second, because you are worth more than pushing yourself so hard that you become a worn out husk. To all of us. Thank you very much. I'm going to pass over to Adrian now.
To summarize what to do about it is to do things like you explore in your own excellent work, which is tilt deliberately toward noticing good things, factual, authentic good things, usually small good things. And then when you notice them out in the world or in yourself or with other people, take a breath or two or three to dwell on them. Savor them, enjoy them, stay with it. If you have a new idea, help it sink in. If you have a sense of strength in your body, let it sink in. If you feel connected with your friend, your grandmother, your cat, let it sink in. And in so doing, by tilting in that way, you just level the playing field. Because Mother Nature is tilted toward short-term survival, but really against long-term quality of life, long-term positive relationships, and long-term physical health and longevity.
So my first...
Let me move on. So a simple activity, which I know lots of people do already, is called 3 Good Things, or it's sometimes called What Went Well. And essentially there's really good research that shows that if at the end of every day, you write down 3 small good things that have happened to you or that you're grateful for, over time what this does is it like Rick says, it tilts our brains, not so that we become biased towards the positive. Actually, it just levels the playing field, so we actually see things more realistically. So just take the next 30 seconds. Don't write down 3 good things. Just think about your morning so far. So from the moment you woke up to now, just write down one small factual thing that has gone well for you this morning. It might be something that you've learned, might be some good news you've had, might be a cup of tea or coffee that you really enjoyed this morning. Just take a moment to just jot one good thing down. Let's give you a few more seconds. Okay, so just to share my small good thing this morning was that I've taught my 4-year-old son in lockdown how to ride a bike, and there were definitely kind of tricky moments on that journey. But this morning, because he's kind of almost mastered it, he's like super keen to get on the bike whenever he can. So this morning at 8 a.m. we went round a ride around the block, and he's just like beaming with pride now that he's mastered that skill. And that's like a lovely thing to have shared with my son. So that's one of my good things this morning. So what the studies show is that the more you practice this, the easier it becomes, the more you start to notice good things all around you. There's a saying in the kind of science of well-being, psychologists often say this. In fact, it's in a lot of ancient philosophy, which is essentially your happiness depends on what you pay attention to. Okay, your happiness depends on what you pay attention to. And right now, there is a lot in the world that we could be paying attention to that is going to affect our mental health and well-being. And it's not about turning away from difficult things that we need to address in society. It's not about that at all. It's about making sure that you do regularly take in the good, because that gives you the inner resources, the reserves you need in order to tackle that challenging, difficult stuff. If we just focus on the bad stuff, it's really going to deplete us. We need that inner resources, that energy to tackle the kind of injustices in society, the problems that we're going to be facing in schools, all of that stuff. We need to take in the good to help us cope with those demands. So that's what we can do personally. You can also bring this into your classrooms. We do What Went Well board on a Friday afternoon in our school, where children think back over their week and they write down 3 things on a post-it note, and they get to share one of their good things. And we created an A3 book, and the post-it notes go in that, so we can kind of look back over our week. You can do this secondary, so that's primary school example. Secondary school, you can do it in your form tutor groups. And the lovely thing is, I don't teach on a Friday. Last year I wasn't teaching on Fridays, I was doing a job share. So my job share was doing the What Went Well activity on the Friday. I'd come in on the Monday, and I'd always go to the What Went Well board before I started anything else, and just read through the things that my children in my class had enjoyed and appreciated. And what was really nice was that when they mention lessons that you taught earlier in the week that they'd enjoyed, it just gives you a boost, and it allows you to cope with the complex and challenging demands of teaching. The other thing I think we really need to do is make teaching sustainable. There's too many of us that are burning out. I've definitely experienced moments of burnout along my kind of 10 years of teaching. And that's why this gentleman, Professor Adam Grant, who's written a book called Give and Take, and he essentially looked at human behavior and people that are generous with their time. So he broadly splits people into 2 groups, givers and takers. Takers fall on the selfish end of the spectrum, and even they fall into 2 separate groups. So there are selfish people that don't care about others, care about themselves. And then there are selfish people that don't care about themselves, don't care about others. So they're kind of on the apathetic end. And then conversely, on the giving side, they fell into 2 groups. There were selfless givers and otherish givers. And I broadly think that teachers or people that choose to go into education probably fall more on the selfless end of the spectrum. And let's see, I'm going to read out some of the qualities of selfless givers, and let's just see if any of this resonates with you. So selfless givers typically sacrifice themselves in order to help others. They often lack boundaries, and what I mean by that is that they are in the habit of just giving, so they don't know when to say no when people ask them to help, because they are selfless people. The downside is that over time they can be taken advantage of because they lack boundaries and they're very willing to say yes to help others. If you think about in a school context, sometimes our most efficient colleagues, because they get the job done, they're always willing to help. They're the ones that are often overburdened because they're just like, oh, Emma's great. Emma's organised a whole conference in Bucks County. Give her this extra task to do because you know she's efficient and she wants to help. But over time, that can kind of really weigh them down. Because they sometimes get taken advantage of, over time they can end up resent giving, and they are most likely, out of the giving end of the spectrum, they're most likely to burn out. So, you know, when I read this research by Adam Grant, I immediately thought of teaching and the teaching profession. We have an incredibly high burnout and dropout rate. And so I think we need to be more otherish. So let's run through those qualities. So otherish people, and the word otherish means they're giving, they think about others, but they don't do it to the detriment of themselves. So they have actually very clear boundaries about how to protect their own well-being. Their giving is purposeful. So they have a very clear reason why they are giving for certain things, certain people, certain projects. And if they're asked to give for things that don't align with their values or their purpose, they are able to say no. And this is another thing that marks them out. They can be quite assertive and they're able to say, no, sorry, I can't help with that project, or sorry, I don't have the time right now. The other thing they're very good at is they recognize the signs of stress and burnout in themselves. So they know when to take time out for rest and recover. And I think that's so important in a profession like teaching, which is incredibly giving. Like we give mentally, we give physically, we give emotionally. And we are in a profession, you know, the health and safety executive has teaching in the top 3 most stressful professions in the UK. The other 2 are midwifery and nursing. You know, we are no use to other people if we completely burn out. So we do have to learn how to be more otherish. And it is, you know, Adam Grant says this in his book, it is a skill that we can learn. We can learn how to put boundaries in place. It's something that we write about in our book, which is about getting, you know, realigning and remembering what your sense of purpose is. Why have you chosen education as a career for you? And allow that to direct your giving. And if things fall outside of that and it's not aligned with your purpose, then, you know, say no, put those boundaries in place. And also, even if something is aligned with your purpose, know when you are at your limit and just start to be braver and saying no to things. And that could be things that actually you really want to contribute to. So like I was meant to do a couple of podcasts this week because they're aligned. It was all about well-being, it was all about mental health. And I had to turn around and say, look, I'm really sorry. I've got too much on this week. And that's a habit that I've had to learn over the years because that doesn't come natural to me. I'm naturally a person that says yes to things. So make teaching sustainable by becoming more otherish, and definitely read that book, Give and Take, if that appeals to you. So let me click on. So we're just going to end with some ideas for kind of protecting ourselves. Nothing that I'm going to tell you in these next few minutes is going to be brand new, but I think often from my experience, my research with wellbeing, it's about, we need reminders about how to take good care of ourselves. I don't know if any of you saw this documentary, I think it's called Alistair Campbell, Depression and Me. And essentially he's suffered with depression his whole life and he continues to do so. And this documentary was about ways that he could, kind of novel ways that he could experiment and try out to manage his depression. And actually, one of the things that resonated with him the most was just a simple metaphor. And I just want to share this with you now. Time, I think we've got about 1 minute left. A couple of things. One, how full is your jar? So there's a couple of things. Yes, she talked about increasing the size of your jar with protective factors, which is massively important. The research shows we underestimate how important good sleep, good nutrition, and regular physical activity is for our mental health and well-being. They are the absolute fundamentals. The second thing is, which she doesn't mention, which I think we need to bear in mind, and it links to otherishness, is about how much we take on ourselves, how much we put inside of our jar that we don't need to. So literally take this pandemic, take this current situation to look at your life, look at how much you've got on, and actively choose stuff to say no to and take out of your jar. Commitments that you can, just turn around and say no to because you can't cope with it right now. Couple of things, mindfulness, because of time, I just want to signpost you to this course. It's called BeMindfulOnline.com, set up by the Mental Health Foundation. Took part in a randomized controlled trial on average with the 200 plus participants that took part. After a 4-week course, they experienced these drops in their mental health symptoms. So stress, depression, anxiety. It costs £30. You fit it. It's a really flexible course. You fit it in whenever you can. It takes 4 weeks. I did the course and I experienced a 66% reduction in my perceived levels of stress. And the other thing is physical activity. It's the closest thing we have for a magic bullet for physical and mental health, according to Dr. Ray Fowler. It's also, Dr. John Ratey says that when we exercise in response to stress, we are doing what our bodies have been designed to do over millennia, which is we use up cortisol, we use up adrenaline, we use up those chemicals that if they stay in our system too long, cause us damage. So get moving more. And the studies show that it's just 30 minutes a day we need to be active for in order to benefit from a host of physical and mental health benefits. So incorporate more standing, movement, walk, incorporate activity into your commute if you can, or literally just get out for a walk every single day. So that's the end of our session. Focus on what's going well, be more otherist, keep those protective factors going. Mindfulness can help you manage stress. Give it a go if you haven't tried it before, and get moving daily. I hope you enjoy the rest of your sessions. I'm really looking forward to joining in to some as well. Emma, did you have any closing words you wanted to say?
No, just to say thank you so much for joining us, and to apologise for my forgetting to record the first half. But Adrian and I will sort that. In fact, what I'll do is I'll record my bit and we'll put it as 2 separate videos because I recorded Adrian's. So thank you so much, everyone. The least I can do is actually do what I've asked other people to do, which is finish on time. So we'll stay around for 5 minutes if you do want to say anything or have any questions. But we understand you probably need to pop off to other sessions, so we won't be offended if you disappear now. But the chat box is open, or actually if you wish to unmute yourself and speak, it would be lovely to actually see some human faces and hear some human voices. Oh, go on, somebody.
Hi, Emma.
Hello.
Jessica here.
Hi, Jessica.
I met you at a few different conferences
around
I
remember you.
Diverse Ed and all that sort of stuff. I just wanted to say thank you to you and Adrian. You've really refreshed me. I've had a horrific week, really stressing myself out, and I had a really good conversation with Angie Brown yesterday about what you can and can't control, and what you've said today this morning has just echoed that, and really made me think about focusing on the things I can control, and like you said, that affirmation prayer thing about focusing on the things that I can do, and just stop having to let go of the stuff that I can't, because I can't control how our school's going to look when we go back in September, and all that, is our current planning going to work, and blah blah blah. It's just too much to even think about.
And actually I didn't go into this, but you can't underestimate the stress people have been under, so school leaders in particular have not stopped since the 18th of March. Well, before then, obviously, but they've had no holiday, no break, and even that it was like the kick in the teeth was that bank holiday in May, when was it Saturday night the government announced the plans?
For the early years and stuff.
First chance that head teachers had to actually recoup and get some rest. No, we can't control Gavin Williamson, I'm afraid.
The guidance coming out is ridiculous. Sort of feel like she's using it for loo paper, really, to be honest.
But so you just but you can't let it upset you, which sounds so simple. But
it is hard to do. But thank you both so much for just making my Friday so much brighter.
Wonderful.
Thanks, Jessica.
Thank you so much. Right, has anyone got anything they'd like to add, or we'll each I'll go back to my email list of people who can't get into their sessions.
For me, it just, what it does, it to the delusion about control, in a way that, of course, we can control ourselves, but we can't control what other people think, do, the actions they take, And yet I think so much of our preoccupation of our time is about trying to control other people in whatever particular shape or form.
Yeah.
Through our thinking, through I wish they hadn't said that, I wish they said this, if only next time they're going to do that, or even by our so for me, it just boils down to this whole, I think it's quite pervasive in education. It's about this external control psychology, rather than actually empowering pupils to control their own actions. We think we need to control them with, whether it be rewards or punishments or something like intrinsic controls like that. And of course, the reward is a punishment, because actually, if you don't have it, it's punitive. And what it does, I think, is then give power over the adult's reward giving behavior anyway. So it gives power, a perverse sort of control that is really unhealthy to the student. It's control is a myth in lots of ways. Can't control other people, but there's so much we can do, which I think you spoke really well to today, about how we can slow down, think about what we are and able to control, which is pretty much, in terms of our inner landscape, most things. It's about being aware of that.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks very much.
Okay, right, lovely. Well, we'll end that here, I think, Adrian, unless you've got anything you want to add. But thank you, because we could happily talk about this all day, and often do. But thank you so much to all of you for joining us. We have really enjoyed having you. I feel properly cheered up for doing that as well.